Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to SportWorks Talks. My name's Christian Page and with me today we have, Tom Dielen. I don't know why that happened, sorry about that. Tom, great to have you with us.
Pleasure.
And great to have you here with us in the studio in Lausanne, the Olympic capital. I would just say it's a beautiful afternoon here. We've been sitting here having a nice catch up. And I was actually thinking about, okay, great, I've been for a run this afternoon. It's been cold morning and nice to see the snow on the mountains. As a kid who grew up in Australia, it's quite a novelty still today. You've been here 24 years. You're more used to it.
A little bit, yes. Although snow, definitely in September, is rare.
It is rare. So great to have you with us. As always, we're going to have about a 20-minute presentation from Tom. We're going to talk about Back to the Future, looking at what's happened in the past and perhaps what are some of the things we can learn from that. And then we're going to do a little bit of Q&A at the end. So as always, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll come to them at the end of the presentation. So for now, I'm going to hand you over to Tom. Great to have you with us and look forward to this presentation.
Thank you. So the theme is Back to the Future. How can we learn from the past? As a small overview of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit about what World Archery is, then talk a little bit about the past, present, the future, and how does this affect sport, and some lessons learned. So World Archery, what are we talking about? Our vision, the vision of World Archery. So the next one, please. Okay. The vision of World Archery is a world where everyone has the opportunity to make the important Olympic sport of archery their elite or recreational activity of choice. So it's talking about opportunity to do the sport. It's an Olympic sport, and it can be elite or recreational. So we don't want to be, I would say, the biggest or the best, but we want to have everyone the opportunity to do our sport. So if we then look at the mission, our mission is to empower our member associations, which are the national federations, to make archery a leading sport in nations around the world. So we are there really as a service provider to our member associations to make sure that they are in a position to deliver our vision. We then go to our values. Our values are precision. We are a sport, it's a lot about precision. Intense. If you've ever been at an Olympic archery competition, you feel the intensity of the competition. We want to be innovative. We are a sport linked to human heritage. Archery is the bow is one of the tools that has been found on all 5 continents independently. And then fair play, a clean sport, and a sport for all ages and abilities. Then if we look at what it's all about, it's the power of precision. If you can do it like this gentleman, who was the one who broke the first 700 barrier in archery with shooting 59 at the last end, and that's what he needed to break the world record. So power of precision. Okay, let's go to the topic of today. The past, the present, the future. I think we've all seen the last few months in the news, people saying, oh, we should destroy monuments from the past, we should forget about the past and so on. But we have to be clear. I've put here 3 important people in history, so people that we should not forget, that said a little bit about that. So Theodore Roosevelt, the more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future. Confucius, to take someone from another continent, study the past if you want to define the future. And then Winston Churchill, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that's often the case in sport. So, for instance, when is new really new? In archery, you have the bow and you have the arrow. When we looked in history, what is very funny is that since 1992, we have been using arrows that are barreled. So they are thicker in the middle than at the end. Now, you might say, this is new. Well, not really. It was already something used in the Ottoman Empire, and there is many arrows found from that period that were exactly the same shape. So It took some time, but we went back to what was used in Ottoman Empire times in terms of the diameter of the arrows. So let's look at some things that we also, I would say, are looking at new things, or we think they're new things, but in reality, it's taking back things from the past. We've seen that in 1936, in the Federation, they proposed for the first time postal competitions. In 1951, they created the first male matches, and quickly they became very popular. And at that time, international federations were basically a 1 or 2 man operation, and the Secretary General at that time was being swamped by mails, and it was not emails, it was mail from the post, and it was becoming too successful. So they had to restrict to maximum 12 participants per country. And then in the 80s, in 1986, the concept completely disappeared because people started to travel more and more to international competitions. So in 2020, we have a pandemic, and suddenly people can't travel anymore. So what happens? We started having internet-based male matches. We did a remote competition as World Archery, the Lockdown Knockout, which had people competing, for instance, from Norway together with people in Colombia. And it was seen as something new, but actually it's just a new version of something that we've already been doing many, many years ago. And now we see in World Archery Americas, our American continent, doing the same. We see many competitions. We had a competition in Japan with 700 participants from all over the world competing together through an online system. So changes, always changes. So one of the things that is funny in our history is if we look at changes, sometimes we say change or be changed. Now, in 1920, archery disappeared from the Olympic Games since every games had different rules that were favoring especially the host country. So, in 1931, FITA, the Fédération Internationale Tir now World Archery, was created to return to the Olympics, have universal rules, organize world championships, and recognize world records. Now, it took till 1955, so it was not overnight, to introduce what was then called the 14-14 round, which would become the Olympic round as such. And that was the Olympic round that was shot in 1972 when archery came back. And then in 1984, the IOC told Bell, you better change or you go out, because it was not very exciting having people shooting 4 days in a row and then the highest score winning. It was not the best way forward. So 1988 was the first attempt with an elimination format and a team format. It was better, but it was still not good enough. So in 1992, a match play format was introduced thanks to the input from people from the IOC, NBC, OBS, or what now is OBS. And so basically from the 4-day marathon, we went to single elimination match play, or you can say the equivalent of the 100 meters. In 1996, another change was made, only one distance. And then after all those changes, and there were not many major changes since 92, but every year there was some change of one kind. In 2005, we started learning again from the past, because saying too many changes, people lose what is now the rule in place. And we had some coaches and athletes that didn't know anymore what the rules were at the competition. We said, okay, this has to stop. So basically a new change was made. The Congress, the year after the Olympics Games, can change the actual laws of the games. A bylaw, which is a detail and implementation, could be changed by the board at all times. Further changes or optimizations, I would say, were introduced in 2012, set play for individuals, and in 2016, set play for teams. Then in 2019, and it's going like a sinus up and down all the time, people said, yeah, but we need more flexibility for rule changes. So now rule changes are again possible, but only for non-Olympic events. So great, we'll see how that goes, but maybe we'll come again to the same rule change as before, that you can't change the rules all the time. So this is something we see, learning back from history, that at a certain moment people want change. If you're forced to make changes because it's survival, it's important to do it. But at a certain moment, enough is enough. And in 2021, we look very much forward to the mixed team competition. And it's something that happened at the first championships in 1931. Look, then we go and see another important change that happened was a change of brand. In 1931, the Fédération Internationale Tir à l'Arc was created. We had in 1954 the first logo. And then in 1977, we had a new president, and he thought it was a good idea to change the logo, which he did, but he didn't consult everyone and just changed the logo. Well, they had so much negative feedback that he had to go back to the old one. So when we created a new brand in 2009 with World Archery, we took it in steps to introduce the new logo, because otherwise we would have ended up in the same mess, because we had learned from the past. So we knew how to introduce it by going step by step. And then we changed the name and the logo for the federation in 2011. Now, we were the first to go to a non-acronym version of an international federation. And since then, many have followed. World Rugby, World Dielen, World Athletics. And we see, maybe one day we'll go back to all to acronyms, but at the moment, the trend is to go away from acronyms. So, what else can we say? What are the lessons we can learn from the past? One thing is very important that we see as such is that in sport, changes are slow. And this is, for instance, where we see the challenge with things like esports. The sporting world is not ready for such quick changes. In esports, we see things like a game being, I would say, live for a maximum of 2 years. When I talk about making changes and you have to wait 4 years to make a change, how is the world of sport coping with those changes? And then, linked to that, for a change to happen and be successful, it takes time and dialogue. This is something we've learned, for instance, with the logo, on how things went wrong in the past and how we can learn from that. The other thing that is important is that you have to learn from the past. You don't have to use it as an excuse not to do something, but you need to learn from it. And this is something in sport, especially, I would say, in recreational activities and clubs and national federations, is often you get that statement of, well, we did it in the past, it didn't work, so why should we do it and try it again? And I think this is something that we have to get away from, especially in the current environment where we will need to be creative, where we need to take risks, try certain things, and then when it doesn't work, stop with it quick enough, because you don't want to lose too many resources on it. So this is something that I think that at least I have learned from the past, that yes, you have to take risks, but then also take action when it doesn't work. So that's what I wanted to say as presentation, but I'm sure we can have a dialogue on certain of these topics.
Absolutely. So Tom, thank you. Great presentation. Great to learn about the history of World Archery and what was FITA and the journey that you've been on. You've been with the organization since
96. I had a 3-year break from archery in 2002 to 2005 when I was at the World Anti-Doping Agency. But I've been internationally involved in sport and professionally involved in sport since 96. Yeah.
Okay. Because you mentioned earlier, we were discussing about, I think Barcelona was the first games you went in 92. How was that experience for you?
Well, it was a fantastic experience. Barcelona, the archery competition was the first time with match play and in single elimination. It was a very good competition, very great venue as well. And I remember some great moments from the Olympics in general. I remember seeing, for instance, Sergei Bubka doing the qualification and I would say jumping much higher than the qualification on his only attempt. And then the next day I was traveling back to home and heard that I didn't win, which I couldn't believe.
And then, so 92, 96, Atlanta. How was that experience?
Well, Atlanta was an interesting experience because it's one of those things where I think Atlanta as such were excellent games. The problem was that the Americans had been saying for 7 years we're going to be the best, the biggest, the greatest ever. So when they delivered something that was, I would say, good, the expectation was so high that the perception was not great. So when you compare it to another games I've been to, Athens, where everyone was in panic that it was taking place, and insurances. There was even a screensaver with the 2004 with a striked out, and then mark 2005, and then they happened. Everyone says dream games. Well, not really, but they happened.
It was, but I mean, what an amazing venue to do archery in Panathinaikos Stadium. It was a magical experience.
A magical experience. It was a challenging venue.
Yes,
and
we weren't allowed to drill any holes in any of it. There was a lot of marble. For those of you who are unaware, Panathinaikos Stadium is one of the original stadiums in Athens that hosted the games.
The problem is the moment you make one single hole in that area, you find something. So then you have to close things for several weeks and so on. It's crazy.
But it was brilliant. It was amazing for the archery. But again, lessons learned, I think what we can learn from the past is about managing expectations.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the challenges we face now, especially with the challenge of the pandemic, is how do we manage expectations?
No, it's a difficult one. And the thing is that, international sport is about international, meaning travel, is bringing people from one part to another part. And this is the big challenge at the moment with the pandemic. So, yes, remote competitions is great, and we've seen that the reaction from the athletes has been fantastic, and they want to compete, but they all say also the same thing is we miss meeting the other athletes and interaction with the other athletes. So this is something where we have to find solutions. And I think all sports face the same challenge, but we start step by step building up again the international calendar.
Yeah, I guess this is where you can look at things where innovation, and we talked earlier about this, was how important a role it plays, but sometimes old technologies work. And I love the way you went back to the mail matching. I think that's, it's a really good example of how, we don't need to use bleeding edge technology to solve a problem. It's a really simple solution to something that could be done.
Well, if we compare and go back to the past, I would say in 1950 they wouldn't have known what a mobile phone was. But here we used basically the athlete used two mobile phones. One was showing him or her shooting the bow, and the other one on the target showing the result. Yeah. And then getting those signals through a 4G network to a production studio, adding commentary, adding graphics, and here you go.
Amazing. And like I say, it's thinking of ways that we can simplify. What can we learn from that simplicity? It's
not always that simple. Like, for instance, one of the things that happened in one of the matches was that the athlete was living in an area that was a big thunderstorm, and the mobile 4G antenna went down, and so we had to find a solution. So we delayed the match for one day. She was able to drive to another place where she could compete as well, and then the next day we could host the match.
Okay. So there's always a way, isn't there? The name change. So World Archery in 2011. Again, a major change. Organizationally, how was that? Because you had the experience and the reference point of 1977 going a little bit wrong. How did you manage that organizationally?
Well, I think we prepared it step by step because we wanted to make sure that it was passing. Mm-hmm. And then I would say we were celebrating the same Congress, our 80th anniversary. And so it was a little bit tricky because people were looking back, and then we had, for instance, the French Federation say, we don't want this change because it's a French name and we want to defend the French name. Yeah. And then we had Archery GB, which had the same year the 125th anniversary, and which was called the Grand National Archery Society. Well, they said, we changed our name from that to Archery GB. So there's no reason. We didn't lose any history with that. We still have our I would say, tradition and our heritage. And so why bother? You can easily go to World Archery.
Okay. So what were people's main concern about the name change?
I would say loss of identity, the link with what happened in the past. they were a little bit afraid that we would be the odd federation that didn't have an acronym and so on.
Now you've paved the way. You
Exactly.
guys were the leaders in that area, which is fantastic. Now you're right. It's we've moved away from acronyms, which is fabulous. It is an industry of acronyms. Absolutely,
I would say you have to be an absolute specialist in acronyms, especially when you go to Olympic Games.
Absolutely.
And you have VNI, BIL. It's crazy.
I think you can have a whole sentence with an acronym.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So looking ahead to the Games, we've got Tokyo ahead. Now we're kind of looking ahead to the future. We've got 2021. You mentioned that every year there's something new's been introduced. What's new for Tokyo?
For Tokyo, there's one major new thing as event at the Olympics. We already have had it in the past at other events, which is the mixed team, which I'm very much looking forward to. It will be on the day one of the Games. So 24th of July, 2021, you know what to watch. And it will show one man and one woman competing against one man and one woman as a team. And it's going to be very exciting because we expect 16 very good teams and a very challenging competition.
Okay. And what's been one of the benefits of running the team competition?
Well, the mixed team competition definitely shows gender equality and it shows a man and a woman competing together. I remember because we already had it in the Paralympics in Rio, and we had, for instance, an Iranian woman with an Iranian man competing together. I think it shows a great message to the rest of the world, and it's really showing a great message that both can compete together. The competition format is very quick, so they have to interact, and it's really a good promotion for gender equity.
It's fantastic. And have you seen that develop sort of in terms of attracting more women to the sport?
Absolutely. And it allows some of the smaller nations to have a team, whereas if you have to find 3 women or 3 men that are competitive, it's more difficult.
Okay, that's fabulous. I think we said earlier, for me, gender equality is an important topic, and it's wonderful to see how you're addressing that. In terms of the ratio, organizationally, you've been able to implement some new strategies, I think, to address some of the gender equality.
Yeah, so I would say one of the things we're doing is at the level of participation of athletes is that we put in a rule that if you can show that you participated for a certain number of times with a man and a woman, you will get an extra vote in our Congress. We're also pushing other things to make sure that there is absolutely a championship men and women, because in certain countries there was only a men's championships. So we're pushing very much in that area to make sure that there is a positive impact. We put ourselves a goal as well. At the moment, we at World Championship, we're at 43%. We want to get to 46% in 2 championships. And ideal one day 50-50, but it's
a great goal. I mean, as I say, I think it demonstrates that there is action being taken, and I think this is one of the most important areas that we need to focus in sport. And I think it's wonderful to see that how organizations and especially federations are taking the lead in that. So great to see and great to hear. Now you also mentioned, how does it compete with the men's and women's teams? How does that?
Well, I would say sometimes people ask in the mixed team. Well, often we see the men performing less well than the women because they want to show that they are better, and that gives more stress. And then the women being very competitive. And I would say what is a major factor between the performance for both men and women is the weather. If the weather is perfect, a top woman can beat a man without problem. If the weather is more challenging, there's more wind, rain, and things like that, then a man is advantaged in the actual performance. But I would say, perfect conditions, anything's possible.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. I look forward to seeing how the team's event happens on the first day in Tokyo. That'll be very exciting. So now we've kind of moving forward, we've got a question that's popped up from Sergey. Thanks, Sergey. What would you say about new disciplines like barebow, the same trend? So this is
Well, bear bow is a little bit going back to the past as well, because before they were shooting all bear bow without the sight and without stabilizer. I think we see it's a little bit also part of what we see in human societies. People want to go back to nature, to simpler things. So it's something that is happening. It's getting popular now. There's a difference between, I would say, getting popular and I would say becoming a discipline at World Championships and so on. So at the moment, we have the discipline, but we're not at World Championships.
So thank you for that question, Sergey. So we've had another question coming in from Verliger. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. You mentioned take risks. Would you currently name running the Olympics next year in Japan a risk that should be taken? Tough question. Very tough question.
My answer definitely is yes, because the risk of not doing it is probably bigger. So I think what we are seeing at the moment is that, okay, we have to be clear. The Olympics will be different next year than what they would have been if they would have been taken this year without pandemic. There is no discussion. Now, we've just finished very successfully, UCI and ASO, successfully the Tour de France, the World Cycling Championships. US Open was run with challenges, but was run. Roland Garros has just started and is going. The professional leagues in Japan, especially in baseball and football, are running, and up to 10,000 spectators. It's going to be different. I think we have to be clear that it will give challenges, but if you talk with athletes that were ready for this year, and you ask them, can you live with certain, I would say, constraints in terms of wearing a mask, perhaps getting a vaccine, doing testing all the time and so on, their answer is definitely yes. And we are going to have our first outdoor competition next weekend. It's a limited competition. There's only 14 countries, mainly because of travel restrictions. But we are convinced that it will show us valuable lessons for next year, or what can be done, what cannot be done. And why we are lucky in the sense that we are an outdoor sport where social distancing is possible without too many issues. So we think we can do it next year. And our friends in Japan are very much looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, great question. And I completely agree. I think it is worth the risk. I feel that, we need to continue. And I think the Olympics is a great flame for us to focus on. So it's a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
So and as you say, it will be different.
It will be different.
It will be different.
And going back to history, I would say when going through some of our archives, I found actually an article, because Tokyo, the last Olympic Games were before the return of archery to the program, and it was interesting to read the article and seeing all the challenges and so they had to be Tokyo in those days, and it happened. So this time it will happen as well.
Definitely. So looking ahead, we touched briefly on innovation, and I know we've got the teams event mixed teams event in Tokyo, but also you bring a lot of new innovation and technology to the sport, which is again enhancing the engagement with the spectators, but also for the athletes and the performance. So I think there's some of these things that we'll see also.
We will have in Tokyo two new technologies on display. One is an automatic scoring system, which is not the first time. We already used automatic scoring in the past, but the past system was based on a laser system, which was very precise, but was also, I would say, having some issues that we use paper target faces as such. They're printed with a certain tolerance, and actually the machine was too precise, so you could see visually something and measure something else. So I would say, as such, the technology was working, but there was one problem, was the precision being too precise, and the second one being that it was very heavy. So every target was around 120 kilos. So transporting them around the world is not easy. So we had some engineers in Germany develop a visual recognition of the target. So it will recognize what is actually the target phase. So there's no issue with tolerance.
Yeah.
And it allows us to get the same speed of measurement, and it's working quite well. And normally we were still using the laser system in Tokyo if the games were in 2020. But as a result of the move, we will be using the new system in 2021 because it's ready for 2021. The other thing is we want to show the difficulty of our sport to the spectator at large, not necessarily the archer that goes and shoot and knows what it feels, but also the one that is just watching for the first time. And for that, we want to show the stress. Now, stress is very much linked to heart rate, so we want to measure the heart rate. Now, heart rate measurement, well, everyone can get a belt and put around the chest, but archers do not like something around the chest when they're expanding their back and so on, so it's not ideal. So we've been looking at things putting a band around the leg and seeing the heart rate. That way, we run into all kinds of problems, temperature, we had problems with skin color, and okay, we tried to have it for London and Rio, and we gave up for both. But for Tokyo, we have a solution. It's completely different. It's basically cameras that are looking at a micro movement in the eyes that shows the heart rate. And it's amazing technology. Unfortunately, it's still quite expensive, but it is planned to show in Rio. In Tokyo.
In Tokyo.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So that leads me on to another question. So we might have to do a deep dive on that at some point, and we'll maybe do a tech series follow-up, because for me that's fascinating. And I think I remember working with the target systems in Rio, and you're right, they were precise and they were heavy, and moving them around the world was not an easy undertaking, but it was also quite it was a great learning experience. I think you think about what we need to introduce and how we meant to introduce change, and it's wonderful to see. So I'm looking forward to seeing those two new innovations. Thinking back in time, you've been involved with the Olympics, and you've been involved with archery, and you've been involved with international sport for some time. Throw this one here. So what's been your most memorable moment?
Well, we were talking about it before, and I think the one that comes back to my mind is something that happened at the Youth Olympic Games in Nanjing, where we had in Nanjing, we had it at all Youth Olympic Games so far. We had a mixed team, men, women, but also mixed in countries. And basically, we were taking the top men and putting with the lowest ranked women, and all the way up the other way around. And if I remember correctly, the third ranked woman shot with the 29th ranked boy. The woman was from China, host country, and the boy was from the Philippines. Now they managed to get through the first two rounds, and then it was lunch break. And so the parents of the Philippine boy were so happy that he already was qualified for the quarterfinals that they took him out for lunch. And then on the way back, their taxi driver got lost. So a few moments before they had started to shoot, we were getting information that no one could find the boy, and they were looking for him, and so on. And so we said, okay, well, we have to get ready for it. So what do we do? Well, the rules are quite clear. He's not there. It did not start, forfeit, and okay. And now we're going to explain this to the Chinese, because their top woman is eliminated because the Philippine boy got lost by a taxi. And so we said, okay, we have to do everything what we can to make sure it doesn't happen. So we informed the people from security. We explained, let him go through as quickly as possible. You know, it's to protect the Chinese girl and so on. So basically, we heard he was coming. We had a few minutes left. He ran from the security gate all the way to the field. The coach was ready with the bow, with the quiver and everything. And okay, the beep goes, and he's there to shoot. And they win the quarterfinals, they win the semifinals, they win gold. So when afterwards we had the ceremony for presenting the medal and the gift. So afterwards I said to the parents, so today he won two medals. one for archery, and one for the 100 meters running.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it's those moments which keep us coming back. I think these are the things that I love about our sport industry, and I love what we have the opportunity to witness and to be part of. And as you said earlier, it's about the athletes, and I think I look forward to seeing them all performing in championships and every possible event. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us today. Thank you so much for coming to join us, Tom.
Pleasure.
And I want to say thank you for all of your questions that came through online and for joining us here on SportWorks Talks. We wish you all the very best. Please stay safe, and we will see you again soon. All the best. Bye for now.
Bye.